Hi, welcome to Fire Team Philosophy. I'm Anthony Farina. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Fabius Maximus and Hannibal, the battle between Rome and Carthage, and how that plays a role into today, especially guerrilla warfare. And we're going to talk about where we get chess from. It's going to be a real interesting story about a queen who lost sons in India and how she created the game of chess, which is still utilized in battle in some forms today. Hassan-I, when he trained Persians elite to be assassins. It's where his name was called Hashin, so it's where we get the word assassin from. I'm going to talk about when you're in a survival situation, some things you can do to use the animal for food, weapons, materials, different things like that, and medicine. And then finally, just with what's going on in the world today, why people seem to be more, maybe just less fulfilled. And it has a lot to do with why we are in a society that is with advertising that brings on instant gratification. So it's not just that we as a people are miserable beings. It's society largely as a whole is responsible for that. So you look sexy after that weight loss. Thank you, buddy. Whoa. Where's the fire? It's too light. Yeah, because of the weather, Krista, because of the weather lately, it's muddy. It's been crappy for like almost the past month. And it's just been getting difficult to get a fire, plus the time crunch. So I do promise next week I'm going to have a nice big fire going. And it'll be a little later. Just got behind the power curve today. And I've got to translate a couple paragraphs in Latin still tonight, which eats my brain away. And I'm not really ready to do much at all after that. So after Latin, I'm toast. But so I want to get the show out of the way, then I can focus on the book. Get a candle out. Shit, I don't have a candle. Let me see. Does one of these things work? Shit. Nope, that's not going to work either. All right. Got a lighter. Anybody that is near the village wants to bring me a candle or a little lighter, I'll have that fire going for you. Sorry, Krista, I owe you that fire. Aaron says, we're at the bar. We can't hear you, but here's a shot of tequila waiting on you. Tequila is bad. It makes you forget things which you do. Anyway, so what's on the agenda for tonight? Okay, so CBD, just thanks to Governor Holcomb, CBD is cannabinoid oil, was made legal here in Indiana. Indiana is one of the more difficult states to get things approved for medicinal reasons and whatever. So what is CBD? Well, it's an extract of the marijuana plant, and it's used for a variety of purposes. A lot of people have PTSD use it. It's been very promising. Why I'm an advocate of it is because myself, along with almost every vet I've known that has PTSD, went to combat. They've come home and they've been put on a whole slew of drugs. I had 16 or 17 at one time. When I got out, I was just handed like big bags of pills and told, okay, take this for sleeping, anxiety, panic, all this other crap. I was like a zombie for my first year home, and I hated it, hated my life. And the same with my friends goes, they take CBD and it kind of encapsulates all that. It really calms you down, slows your heart rate. And it's oil. No, there's not THC in CBD oil. Some companies do put 0.05%, but that's the equivalent of having a non-alcoholic beer that has 0.05% alcohol in it. So that's a big thing people think is a mistake. No, I'm not advocating you go smoke weed or anything like that at all. Just saying CBD is legal. It's legal for a reason. And it does help if you're on multiple medications. Give it a shot. You can now get it wherever. So on with that. I'm going to read a little Latin tonight and do some just minor teaching, help you understand the language, because I'm ending the first year of it, and to me Latin was always a mystery how the endings change in words, especially through prayer, or if you hear somebody spouting it off on TV, something like that. So I'm just going to cover a few basics. It's not going to be boring at all, and it'll just give you a better view and understanding why the language is what it is and how the Romance languages came adapted from Latin. And no, the Romance languages have nothing to do with the Romantic era. Okay, look it up. It was like Portuguese, French, Spanish, Italian. There's one other. Anyway, so those Romanian is the other Romance languages. So, but on to that, our man of the night tonight is pretty badass. His name is Quintus Fabius Maximus Verrucosus. Now, he was given the name Cunctator, and what that means is the delayer. Now, some credit him as being the father of guerrilla warfare. It's kind of where it started, we're talking about 200 AD is when all this took place. So it's between him and Hannibal Barca. Hannibal was the leader of the Carthaginians whenever Rome and Carthage were battling it out for years. That Hannibal was the leader. He took a army. Elephants was kind of a big key there, and he marched over the Alps. He made when the elephants got over the Alps, as he was going to use them for siege weaponry, they died. So he didn't have siege weaponry, and that's where one of Hannibal's biggest faults was. But we'll get on to why he is credited with having the biggest victory over Rome in the sense that he was responsible for the bloodiest single-day engagement in all of military history, and what we can learn from that. So, like I said, so Quintus Fabius, he wasn't looked upon highly by the Romans until his tactics started working. So I'll kind of tell you what he did. Now, his whole idea was that if he was to defeat Hannibal, he had to delay Hannibal's efforts. And Hannibal's main effort was, okay, I'm going to go fight these small skirmishes. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to force people out of fear to join my army, and I'm going to grow my army. And so Fabius knew that if he could deny Hannibal these little skirmishes and keep denying him, that's why he's delaying the war, then he could shrink Hannibal's army. And at the same time, what he did was he would attack Hannibal's supply lines. So he had him twofold. Now, Fabius, he was the man of the Roman Republic they needed during the Carthage War. They had another leader, and he failed miserably, and then Fabius takes back over. So the two battles, if you look them up, around 209 and 212, I believe, were Trebia and Trasimene. Those were two of the biggest losses for the Roman Empire. When hey, what's up, Karen? How you doing today? I hope you're doing well. Trebia and Trasimene were the two biggest battles of that time, and they were the two biggest victories. So in respect, so he crushed the Roman Empire twice in each of those battles with nothing but a band of mercenaries. I think he had like the Celts or something, the Irish. He must have just fed the Irish whiskey and pissed them off. So they went to war and kicked the shit out of Romans. Anyway, but his main fault, like I said, was Hannibal lacked siege weaponry. He couldn't take Rome because he had no catapults. Well, that's what siege weaponry is. Today we would call artillery. It's any long distance range weapon that can attack an objective and do mass damage. So back then it was catapults and ballistas. Today it's artillery, something we called MLRS, big rocket, goes up in the air, come down. They shoot in multiples like 10 and 20. It's crazy. So as he was doing this, he knew that, okay, since I don't have the siege weaponry, I've got to do all these skirmishes and get the people from the towns and whatever, recruit my militia. So what Fabius did is he contained Hannibal's army to this big area, Campania. And he basically let Hannibal just have free roam and do whatever he wanted in the area. The Romans just took their hands off for like, okay, let him do whatever he wants to do. So what this did, besides delay, which is one of the tactics of war, is deception. That's also one of the principles of war. He was deceiving Hannibal to the point of making him think that, okay, you're building your army, we're afraid of you, we're not coming to attack you. So it's just a false sense of security he gave him. The Romans didn't like this because their method of war was a swift victory, was to go in and crush, take over, move on. They didn't like invaders or any of this other stuff. So when he kept him at Campania, this is when Fabius went around and he built up the Roman forces. And he built them up to, like, I don't know, it's a large number, because the Roman forces were dwindling after Trebia and Trasimene. So what goes on is the Romans at this time, after Trivia and Trasimene, they elect this guy, Lucius Paulus. He was given control over the army. And so Lucius takes his big army in there, sweeps down into the area of Campania, and basically that's where the battle, it's the Battle of Cannae, Cannae. It's the single bloodiest one-day engagement in all military history. So something like 80, only a couple thousand Romans escaped with their lives, and Hannibal just had very few forces to fight with that. No siege weaponry, none of that crap. So that was considered a huge defeat and a huge blow. So the Romans decided, okay, Fabius, you're doing something right. We're going to go back and give you control. So through his time, while he's planning to take over Hannibal, he's building up the army again, but he's also elected to the Senate. And the word in Latin here, I gotta get this screwed up. Seneca. Okay, Senecus. And Senecus is for the word Senate, and that's where we get it a lot. I just got thrown a little story here. So there's a thread going on today. Interesting fact. Romans used to get paid in salt. And so salt was this big commodity back then. It's what you could use to cure your food. You could trade it, bartered with it, all this sort of stuff. So if we ever go back to, or if we ever head into post-apocalyptic days, your best bet is to have salt on hand. It's something that isn't going to erode away quick. You can use it for many things, treat wounds, all that stuff. Now, we get from them being paid their wages in salt, we get the word salary from. A lot of basis, a lot of they call the principal parts in Latin. When you have a word, you have 4 principal parts, right? Each principal part determines if it's a masculine, feminine, or a neuter form of the word. And then what it's going to do is, with that part, so to speak, it's going to tell us how it's used and where it's used in the sentence and all these different things. So what they'll do, for example, this is just an example. You got the I, the you, the he, she, it, the we, the they are, and the them person. So each of those things I just went down has a specific ending. Example, laudo or laudare, laudo, if you cut off the O, which is what you do, lauds, is praise. Now the ending for we is imus, I-M-U-S. So you would put loud, imus, laudimus, and that is we praise. So that is how dominate. Yes, okay. Daryl Johnson says dominated, dominus. That's true. Now dominus, before we looked at the term dominated, back in the day is overruling. The dominus was the head of the household. Okay, the dominant person. So later it goes on to morph its meaning into dominating in war or whatever. But basically that's how it is. So with each of those 6 endings, the you, the all that stuff, you have a different ending you attach to the root of the word, the loud. Monero, for example, is to delay, right? So if we add monerimus, that's we are delayed. Hope that clears up a lot of stuff. But that's why it takes so long to learn Latin, because you have to memorize the endings, and then you have to memorize what the actual word is, and then, before it gets even better, it has like the imperfect tenses, meaning like we were doing, that kind of crap, and it's getting confusing, so I'm gonna stop. But then it brings on a whole new meaning of 6 more endings you have to memorize. So every word essentially has like 36 endings, I believe. So if you're not just learning one word in Latin, you're learning 36 different types of words, and it's a pain in the butt. It really is. So I'm glad I have just a very basic understanding of it, because it intrigues me. Anyway, so back to Fabius. So the Fabian strategy, as it was known, is what the Romans turned back to using against Hannibal. And as Fabius is taken over in the Senate, eventually he dies. However, Hannibal gets forced to Africa. He is taken out by a Spanish leader named Scipio, I think it was. Scipio, yeah, the Spanish leader. October 19th, 202 AD. He was defeated Hannibal was defeated then, and then that goes on and so forth. So that's your little interesting bit for tonight. So what is guerrilla warfare? As we're moving on, before we get to the survival, and then all of us surviving in today's society. Well, oh yeah, real quick. So there was this deception technique that Hannibal used on the Romans. Pretty cool. So what he did was when he was down in Campania in the field, he took these torches and he tied them to cattle, like something like 2,000 cattle, and he herded them over the hill, this big hill out of the valley. And the Romans thought, oh, that's all the men with the torches. So they came in and they were trampled by cattle. Pretty crazy shit. So you think about it, but he's called the father. Fabius called the father of guerrilla warfare. For various reasons like that. But it's, if you look up the principles of warfare, it's like delay, deception. There's taking over by force and all these other things. It's just good stuff to know about. You can actually, there is a book, if you're in business, this is a great book to look up. It's called The Art of War for Business Managers. It applies the art of war techniques to how you should run your business. And I mean, I didn't really hit on deception too much in that book, but the principles, the underlying principles that Sun Tzu has, you can apply to everything in your life. Okay, you can loyalty, how to gain loyalty from people, how to inspire loyalty, how to raise morale, things like that. One of the things I hear from a lot of my friends constantly too is, their boss sucks, and they would enjoy work so much better if their boss wasn't crappy to them. And so, in the military, I often seen that as your leadership determines a lot about your men, and it determines if people are going to stay or not. I've seen it where guys had great leaders and they were motivated. They went on to re-enlist. Also at companies, people will do extra for you. They'll do extra if they believe in you as a leader. If you're setting the stage, if you're doing the examples and you're showing people the right way, they'll do extra for you, and your company will do better. Same with the military. But if you're a toxic leader, I mean, you're just constantly angry, you're singling somebody out. If you're sexist and you're just always giving women a hard time, whatever, your company and your structure is going to fail. It fails because of your inherent selfishness to not understand that you need to change your moral obligations from not just making money, but to how people are and caring about your employees. Your employees are your most valuable resource. People. I think Negan said that shit on Walking Dead. People are the most valuable resource, And it's true. So what do you do if you have a toxic boss? Honestly, that's something that's always a case-by-case basis. I think first thing is to professionally voice your concerns, and try to take it up with the right people in your chain of command or whatever. And if it comes to the point where your job is just so toxic, it's making you miserable every day, you might want to gauge on how valuable your mental health is versus staying somewhere you hate. Now, I'll give a shout out to my mother, man. I tell you what, she works at the Subway, local Subway here. Now, Mom has worked there for almost 20 years, I want to say. Yeah, so about 2 years before I graduated high school, she started Subway. And people know her everywhere. Like, oh, your mom's a Subway lady. I'm like, yeah, I love hearing that because, it says Mom stayed dedicated to that job. But I ask her about it. I'm like, well, when are you going to retire and stop? And she's like, I'm not. Now, when you would think of Subway, you're like, why would somebody just want to keep working there? Well, Mom's made it such a place that people want to come back. They like seeing her. They like the way that she listens to the customers, how clean she keeps the store, all these little things she pays attention to. Mom's not interested so much in boosting the company profits, though that is important. She's more interested in the customer itself, and that is the key. That's the key in everything. And we'll get to that later when we hit on our social media issues today and why that's important, and how, found something interesting from Mayo Clinic, how it links back to pharmaceutical companies pushing drugs even from the 30s. So we'll get to that in a moment. So with that, we're going to go to the story of chess. Speaking of guerrilla warfare. So the story goes that in India, this was around when the Persian Empire was ruling. The Persian Empire was at its key strength. And now the capital of Iran is Tehran, but back then they pronounced it Tehran. And what happens is this man from India comes up to the Persian kingdom. He comes to Tehran, and he has his board with pieces, and he gets an audience with the king. And the king is like, okay, show me this game. So he shows him the game. He plays a few rounds. He shows him the basic, and the king falls in love with this game. And he says, I want this game. How much is it for you to give it to me and teach me everything you know about it? Being the smart man the Indian was, he says, you're going to pay me, you're going to take 1 grain of rice here in the corner on that square, and then you're going to multiply it by the next square. And you're going to multiply that grain of rice across the whole board, up, down, left, right, and diagonal, the way the queen moves. The king, without hesitation, goes, done. Golden. The magistrate of the king of Persia steps up and says, wait, I need a minute for this. Can I have like a day to go over these numbers? And so the king, being a little frustrated, he didn't really understand why, but he's like, okay, I'll humor me. You have 1 day. So what it came to be, I forget what the exact number is, but if King of Persia would have accepted that offer to pay the grain of rice multiplied by the moves of the queen across the board. There's 64 squares, I believe, in a chessboard, if I'm not mistaken. India would still be receiving wheat today from Iran. That's they were masters at strategy, you know. And you can look at it how guerrilla warfare has evolved over the ages. You know, we fought the insurgency in Iraq and Afghanistan and Vietnam. It could be seen very clearly when the jungle, often the Viet Cong would set and they would wait and give them places and they would fire and they would wait for troops to move closer. They would get them into the position where they wanted them, and then they would launch their attack. When in the beginning people would think, oh, this is the main attack, and then they would run and try and get to where the enemy wanted them to be. But that's what guerrilla warfare is, and we ran into it in Iraq. I mean, over and over and over. Guerrilla warfare is just basically, you're going to see it when you have an opposing force is fighting for their land because they're outnumbered and outgunned, and it works great. It's all about delay and deception. You have to deceive the enemy. And it became very confusing for us in Iraq because remember in the second tour in 2008, the enemy was wearing Iraqi army and Iraqi police uniform. And I remember clearly seeing a guy on a rooftop, just 2 rooftops over. We're in the top of a building one day. He's in an Iraqi army uniform and he's shooting straight at us, me and 5 other guys. And I'm like, what that? Do we shoot back at him or no? And then eventually came down, yeah, they were killing Iraqi army at the checkpoints and Iraqi police, and then they were taking the uniforms and they were using them against us. So it's a classic form of guerrilla warfare. And IEDs, roadside bombs, improvised explosive device, that's what IED stands for. EFP is an explosively formed penetrator. It's a little disc. It's packed with C4. It's put in an apparatus, and then when it shoots out, it inverts like a big bullet and it'll go through a tank. So those types of means, which were cheap, easy to come by, and easy to employ, are used in guerrilla warfare. And it's a type of warfare, even though we've changed strategies throughout the years on how we fight as people. It's a type of warfare that's never going to go away. That's why I like studying it, because you can always use it to some benefit in your life. You know, you launch guerrilla warfare on your checking account if you got to get out of debt. I don't know, some shit like that. So figure out how to use it, but use it for the good. And always, the questions I ask myself today are, what is the ethical, moral high ground to take in any situation? Do I do this or do I do that? And a lot of times I kind of fail. But I still ask myself that question to get into the habit of doing what is morally correct. I've been sleeping better at night doing this versus doing that. And it's kind of been a way that I change, you know, and it's difficult. But in a way, it's guerrilla warfare against myself. I have to deceive myself into doing the right thing. How sad is that? So, all right, last 3 things here. Last half hour we're coming up to. The next guy, Very interesting. Hassan-I, right? If you look up the story, The Old Man and the Mountain, you'll kind of get the gist of what this is. So how I was told by my Persian teacher, which really got me interested into this, was Hassan-I had this castle on the mountain, or some kind of hideout or something, right? And so what he would do is he would take the elite from the Persian army, like the 1 out of every 100 men. And even though they have been proven in battle or haven't been proven in battle, he'd bring them up to the castle to train them. And they would train for like 2 or 3 years, right? They would train in art, mathematics, astronomy. Main thing is, one of their main tactics, they had to learn how to dress like a woman. They were also made eunuchs, by the way. That's key later here in a second. But they had to do that because what would happen was, if Hassan-I wanted somebody dead, it didn't matter if you were a king or not, that man ended up dead 100% of the time. He had no failure rate whatsoever. And so as it would happen, he would give the men a cyanide capsule or some form of cyanide. And these men were trained to explode the heart with 1 punch. And I mean, that's why I said it took him like 3 years to do this. So when Hassan-I, what he would do is he would hand a piece of paper with a location and a name on it to one of his assassins, right? And then they would go to work studying the stars, the land, all these different things. And so being that they were eunuchs, they couldn't be tempted, but also it was a form of, it was something that the enemy, if they were captured, could not torture them with, doing whatever. So what would happen, most of the stories go, is the enemy, the assassin would get close within arm's distance to the king or to whoever had to be assassinated. He would yell out, Hashishin, and means assassin, or in the name of Hassan-I, and they would punch him and explode the heart, or they would kill him in some manner. Now, usually when that was done, they would pop the cyanide capsule, and within a few minutes, the man would be dead. So when they started finding these men, the word got around that they were discovering these men, they had no generals. And so that's where the eunuch thing became important. So it was also almost like a calling card that these guys didn't give a shit. All right, if they're coming for you, you're going to be dead. And it put the fear of everyone in Persia, all the different leaders and rulers. It had them scared. So eventually, I think he had at the most, there was like 300 assassins, if I'm right. And they had a battle at this castle, and he was his castle and his assassins, everybody was killed up there. But what's interesting is when you hear about on the movie 300 and they talk about the immortals, okay, that's who they were in there. They weren't fucking guys with weird teeth and shit like that. So no, it was just it's just something else to kind of, okay, yeah, they did exist. They were the most fearsome fighters in all of Persia, in all of Asia at that time. But they didn't like eat their firstborn or any shit like that. They were highly intelligent. They were very well trained, and they were already the best of their group before they even started their training. So anyway, yeah, that's the legend of Hassan-I. So there is so my quote here from Fabius. He says, I'm not going to read it in Latin because I'll botch it up probably. He says, one man saved this. This was in reference to him. Cicero, when addressing the Senate, he declares this about Fabius. He says, one man saved the state for us by delaying. He used not to put rumors and report before the safety of Rome. His glory, therefore, now is very strong and will always be strong. What's interesting is he says, we can learn from this, is that he used not to put rumors and report before the safety of Rome. He didn't find it valuable in spreading false information, in that time to the Roman people, telling them, hey, we're winning, when they actually weren't. He didn't go about doing that. He didn't believe in scaring the Roman people, or telling them something that wasn't true. And so the safety of Rome was his utmost important thing. So how can we learn from that? Well, when we maybe if we come across a time in our life when we want to spread a rumor or gossip about somebody, we can think, what is more important? Am I going to get anything about gossiping or telling this fact about this person? Is there going to be more in it for me? Or what are you doing? 9 times out of 10, when you spread rumors or gossip about people, you do more damage. You do damage to the person, and then you do damage to yourself because you're actually violating, it's like you're violating integrity in a way, some kind of moral code, I feel. And I don't feel comfortable with that. So, anyway, so yeah, I've been looking into this survival school down in Utah, Boulder, Utah. Where is that? So I'm thinking of residing in Salt Lake City, and it's about 4 hours or so from there. Back to the mountains, old boy. What's really cool about this survival school, it's put on by they're a German company, KUHL. They make a lot of outdoor hiking gear, things like that. And they teach, in respect to survival, they teach everything from, how to find medicine, how to start a fire with just wood and tinder and stuff like that, and how to navigate using the stars. You guys know the trick where if it's a half moon, you take one point here to the next point, and you shoot it straight down to the horizon, and I believe that is south. So if you look at that, if I remember, I have to refresh my data. Anyway, there's tricks like that they teach you. They train you very well. That culminates after the end of 30 days. For 3 days, you're out in the desert by yourself, trying to get from point A to point B, and I think it'd be really cool. I just got to get in a little bit better shape. I got to make sure my arthritis isn't kicking up while I'm out there. But what's also cool is they teach you the most primitive ways, but about using your environment, so you're not relying on GPS and all that stuff. And I've always been a fan of that because, one is technology. When it comes to survival, I don't really care for technology. I was in the military. I guess you can say it's a form of technology. I was trained how to use a map and a compass before anything else. I was trained on that for a couple of years. So I feel very confident in using a compass and a map and a protractor, which is what you need to place on the map to get your direction, your distance from point A to point B, over using a GPS. And now what they do in this survival school, one of the parts is teaching you how to cut up an animal and use the different parts for weapons, for tools, and for medicine. And one of the main things in medicine they talk about, surprisingly enough, is the lard from an animal. And apparently lard goes bad really quick. So you have to cook it at the right temperature. And I don't know how they figure this out, but basically it can't be too hot. It's like porridge. Can't be too hot, can't be too cold. And it's got to cook for a certain amount of time so you can preserve it. And then lard can be used for a number of things, for bait and all these other things. But there's some medicinal properties for lard as well. Now, the other thing is, if any of you guys have ever cooked at home with the bone and the animal, let's say making chicken soup but using the chicken with the bone in while you boil the broth, or making beef stew, but you use the bone and, can't mess up my language here. Anyway, so the bone marrow is one of the most nutritious parts. And if you ever have bone marrow soup, it's really good, but it's very nutritious. And that is one of the biggest things out in survival is you're going to be burning about 3 times as many calories as you would normally. So I was telling a friend this one cool trick. If you guys know what sinew is, now sinew is when you take the muscle out of an animal and the white strips in there, the real tough white strips, the fibers of the muscle, it'll be like a little string. And so what you do is you carve the meat away, you get this little tendon or this string looking thing, put it on a rock and you dry it out for like a day. Right. And then what you do is when you get like 2 or 3 of these, you start weaving them together to make like a piece of twine or a piece of rope. You can do this for, use your imagination, how much ever rope you need to create. But one of the things that I was taught about was how to make a bow. And we had an Indian instructor out in survival schools. It was really cool. He made this bow. He used 2 different pieces of wood. I think it was like a hickory and an oak, right? And he somehow joined them together. He soaked them, and then he bent them, and he soaked them, and he bent them, and he had time together. And then they would use the hide, the leather on the hide, to keep the bow out of the elements if they're going to use it for a long time. So if you actually see an old school bow, it's not just wood, it's actually got hide on it, and it's got the different pieces of sinew. So the sinew also they use for a bowstring. And I mean, this arrow was like, when he shot this arrow, it was like from the movie Predator when Schwarzenegger shoots it and it goes through a tree. It was really good tension on it. So, but it took him, I forgot how long he said it took to make this, like a week or two. And it was a lot of craftsmanship went into this bow. So, then you can obviously sharpen the bones to use as arrowheads and things like that. So that's what's very interesting about using an animal for survival, when we often think that, hey, I'm just going to catch it, I'm going to cut the meat off, and I'm going to cook it over a spit. There's so many other parts of the animal you can use. It's ridiculous. You can really make your life comfortable out there. Now, what animal was it? There was an expedition going to the Arctic. It's early 1900s. And the scientists wanted to test out how, I think it was beaver skin. They made beaver skin shoes for the people on the expedition. And some of these guys who went on the expedition were very, very seasoned. They had been climbing all over the world at this point. When they came back, they said that the beaver skin boots or shoes or whatever they made for them to hike on the mountain, they said they were the most comfortable and the most durable type of shoes they've ever had. And I'm sitting here wondering, like, why the hell don't we make that stuff today? We got all this cheap crap that's come across the store, So beaver skin boots would be, I don't know. Yeah, use them for survival. Just don't go out to the club or anything with them. So no points for that. But anyway, last few minutes here while I'm boring the shit out of all of you. I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. And yes, there'll be a fire next week. I do apologize for that. Next week, I got to go down to Savannah, Georgia. Be a good time. Happiness in today's social media world. Let's start with the basics. All right. So what really got me interested in this was doing a study on different medications that I had been on in the past, and then how far back they go, why they were created in the first place. And I used to be on ADHD medicine for a little bit, and it really made me feel like crap. But I found out that as early as in the 30s, college kids were taking Benzedrine. And this is like Afrin, the stuff you put in your nose to clear your sinuses and allergy. They were taking Benzedrine, and they were taking the cotton out of it, and they were chewing on the cotton to get an immediate high from the methamphetamine. I guess methamphetamines were encouraged back up through the 50s till we had the Controlled Substance Act is what came up, I believe, in the early 70s. But up to that time, there were a lot of different things that people were doing, to get high off of. And so what it comes down to is then we get in the age of Ritalin, of Adderall, and Vyvanse and Nubian and all this stuff. They wanted to find a way, scientists wanted to find a way to make people smarter, so to speak. And so that's why all these different ADHD medicines, apparently the diagnosis is just BS. I mean, I still say I have it, but the reason they diagnosed it was BS, not the actual diagnosis. I stand corrected. So they diagnosed it to basically market methamphetamines and methamphetamine salts. And they work on, if you're familiar with the brain parts, all the catecholamine system. And it controls the pleasures and rewards and all this other stuff, sensors in your brain. So what would happen is the pharmaceutical companies want to make something stronger, last longer. And then college kids got on it with Ritalin. Kids were going to school getting on Ritalin. Well, the problem is it's still a methamphetamine, and you're giving a methamphetamine to a child, they'll develop an addiction one way or another. People who've worked at Goldman Sachs or any big techie companies are constantly under pressure to produce more code, solve out algorithms, all this other stuff. And, there's one guy I was reading about, he worked at Goldman Sachs. And him and his buddy had to work for 3 days straight. They were popping Adderall for 3 days straight to figure out this report and give it to this big company in China. Anyway, his buddy at the end of the 3 days ends up going to the hospital because of cardiac arrest. And he was kind of getting scared there after he found out that when his buddy went in, they just replaced that guy with some other random guy and just kept working. He's like, the company really does not care about the people. They just want the productivity. It's kind of what's going on now. So where does this bring everything? Well, because in that time when we were transitioning from everybody be on methamphetamines that works in tech or going to school, our collective society is getting into an information age where advertising is key. And if you notice, advertisements are cut a lot shorter, but they're a lot more profound and powerful. And it can be like you'll be looking at one thing, and all of a sudden you're looking at something else. We don't live in the age of information, my friends. We live in the age of distraction. So now the government or whoever's created this big problem with distraction with everywhere you go throughout your whole day, you're going to be seeing an advertisement for some kind of company, somebody doing something, and it's a big rat race, right? So with that, you're told, well, maybe you have a slow brain, take this drug, it's going to help you focus and all that shit. No, the problem is not that you need to take a drug. The problem is you need to turn down some of the distractions. Yep, that's where it's at. I ain't against having coffee or none of that shit, but I tell you what, when that thought kind of occurred to me, I was like, maybe that is the answer. It's not that social media is this bad, big, evil tool. It's how we use it. It's just that it runs off of advertisements. They make money off of marketing through advertisements. So what are you essentially going to see if you're on here, Facebook or Twitter or Instagram? You're going to see nothing but constant advertisements all the time. And what that does is it shortens your attention span, because now that you're getting instant gratification in some little form of a dopamine release over and over and over from this preview or that ad or something that looks cool, when you tend to step away from that, you're constantly looking for it. You're looking for your brain to be occupied and do something. Then what happens? Well, nighttime comes and you can't sleep well. We as humans are not meant to operate like this. Okay, we've constructed this in our society, and it's money, right? So what do? Well, I believe, I found my own happiness in this, what I'm about to explain to you. Now, a lot of you know me, will know I've had issues for a long time with suicide and all that other stuff, and I was very miserable for a long time. And true, I still have dreams about the war and that crap bugs the shit out of me, but for the most part, what I had learned to do was to control what I'm seeing, what I'm around, what I'm surrounding myself with. By doing that, by shutting the TV off an hour before bedtime, by reading fucking Latin, that'll put you to sleep at night. By having these different habits, it's helped me to just more relaxed. I'll say that, not worrying so much about this, that, and the other. I've actually come back to my faith in such things, because prayer requires meditation, it requires, being quiet, all these things. So I think it's having some really good domino effect in that sense. So I encourage you guys to do that too. If you're just kind of generally just unhappy and you can't figure things out, maybe it's just the amount of stuff you're exposed to daily. You're exposed to all kinds of different, crap. Look at all the movies coming out. Every time you turn around, there's new movie previews, new show preview. Maybe if you control it and put all that stuff on hold or make it go away, and then start filling your life with other more natural things, go for a walk, whatever, you'll have the happiness comes back, because the happiness is already there inside you. It really is. It's that those distractions we see are getting in the way of it. Here's an example. You go to answer a message on social media, or for God's sakes, your email. Email is just a big spam folder these days. It used to be somewhere I could go to a lot, but I don't know. Everybody's got everybody's email these days. So now it's just filled up with junk. But the point is, you're going to go on here, you're going to answer somebody's message, you're going to see what somebody's doing. And no sooner, within a few seconds, somebody else is doing something, and this and that, and all these different ads pop up, whatever. But where that also breeds negativity is when we see people on social media. You got to remember, people, there are some people that do this, but by nature, people are posting the best version or the happiest moment at that time. And so when we see all these people having these different happy, great moments, but internally we're having a shitty day, we compare ourselves to that. We get upset. We feel down. We're like, man, I wish my life was like that. We develop jealousy and envy. And it happens slowly. It doesn't happen all at once, but it happens slowly over time. So that's where I go back to my point of eliminating it, stepping away from it. It's have your social media and all that crap. That's fine. I do. But limit the amount of time you're exposing yourself to it. Try to just cut back. What I did, instead of saying, okay, an hour a day, I won't do this or something, I just said, okay, before I go to bed, an hour before I go to bed, I shut crap off, or I tell people whatever, and I'll turn the phone off, but then I'll stay up for an hour reading or doing something. And it's become a very healthy habit, because also I found out when I wake up, my mind isn't racing, worrying about the last crap I saw on the computer. Actually been waking up trying to figure out which conjugation of what word in Latin was, and that's bugging the shit out of me. So, like listen to this, some of this. De eo amicus noster enius doctus ille poeta haec verba oleum scripsit. It's like, what the hell? Yeah, do that 10 times fast. Oh, and by the way, if you ever hear somebody speaking Latin and they pronounce a V, Latin does not have a V sound, they have a W. So Wenibut is actually spelled V-E-N-B-B-I-T. So yeah, just a little quick thing for you. But anyway, that's what I think is happening, because not only are we comparing our current state and emotions to all these happy things we see from everyone else, we start comparing our own relationships to this happy couple smiling, and all these other things like that. So it really isn't healthy. It goes back to the old saying of, focus on yourself. You really find the peace internally. It's all right here. It's right now, it's just too bombarded by society through advertising and everything else to actually come out and let you be happy. The happiness is already there. You are happy people. I don't care how miserable you think you are, you're happy. So you have the ability to be happy, and you're always fighting for happiness. It's there. It's just fighting to get away from all the distracted bullshit in the world, right? So that's kind of what's going on. So that's brings me to my last point, that I figured out what I had to do. What I figured out what I had to do may not be what you have to do, but maybe it helps. I had to reprioritize my life. Not my schedule. Okay, it was part of it. But I had to figure out who it was that deserves my time and attention and who doesn't. Was I giving it to people, not to sound like dick, that weren't deserving, but if I gave time to people, did they really care? And when I started to figure out, I was like, I'm wasting a lot of my own time on a lot of the wrong people and on a lot of the wrong things. And hi buddy, you gonna say hi to everybody? I spent a lot of time with him now. Well, yeah, we'll go for a walk and all kinds of shit. Hi, yeah, we did. You chased some deer and you chased a bird today. That was fun, wasn't it, you son of a bitch? Yeah, you're getting a little crazy out there. So anyway, we've been going on more walks and everything else. And I'll tell you what, I have a happier dog. I just had to reallocate what was important. And I hope you guys can take some wisdom in that and some good advice, and just maybe try that out too, because it's brought me happiness. I used to be a miserable son of a bitch. So anyway, that's it for tonight. We're not going for another walk. I'm sorry. You already had 3 pieces of bacon a day. You're on a diet. So anyway, next week, do a show heading to Savannah, and probably try and do a show next weekend. So I'm going to be with all the guys from the Invasion, and I think there's a place where they've got a fire up there too. But if not, week after that I'll come back. I'll do the fire here and close this thing out. So anyway, thank you guys for giving me your time tonight. I hope you learned something good or you found something enjoyable. Please feel free to share this video, and Ambush will send you a thank you card with a paw stamp on it. Isn't that right, you son of a bitch? Okay, no, he's not agreeing to that. Okay, guys. I'll see you all later. And hey, what? All right. Bye, guys.